Started. We are missing 3 members at the moment, but Terry's tracking people down here quickly.
You want me to get going? All right, I'll call this meeting to order of the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning. Again, this is been permitted by the state of Illinois, and we have a couple things at the end of the meeting. We're going to go into executive session, and you'll be instructed to go to a separate room for that, and we'll do our business, and then I will come out and then close the meeting at the end, but that will pop up in your screen when we're ready to do that, to take you into another room. The only change on the agenda is that we'd like to introduce a representative appointed by the governor. I thought we mentioned last week that that was going to happen, and we have, I think he's still on the line, Dr. Abu
Fazal Mohammed. I go with Kuros. That's easy.
All right. Thank you, Doctor.
Sure, my pleasure.
He comes from a Department of Civil Materials Engineering, Environmental Engineering at UIC, so we have some expertise on the board, so we thank you.
My pleasure. Looking forward to working with you and the rest of the board members.
Thank you. I hear some background noise, so anybody please, if you're not speaking, to mute your background. Thank you. And with that, I'll first ask for approval of, no, before I do that, we have a roll call. Aaron?
That's right. Thank you. Mayor Bennett?
Present.
Rita Athos?
Present.
Frank Beal? President Brawley? Commissioner Cox?
Here.
Mayor Darch?
Here.
Jim Healy? Mayor Noak?
Here.
President Reinbold?
Here.
Mayor Rottering?
Here.
Carolyn Schofield?
Here.
Deputy Mayor Sheehan?
Here.
Matt Walsh?
Here.
And Diane Williams?
Present.
Great, we have a quorum.
All right, great. We have a quorum. And the first item on the agenda is the minutes. I'll ask somebody to identify themselves to make the motion to approve it and somebody to second it.
Mayor, no to approve, motion to approve.
And Mayor Brawley from Montgomery, second, and also note that I'm here.
Thank you.
Mayor Brawley.
Moved and seconded. Aaron, call the roll.
Mayor Bennett?
Aye.
Rita Athos?
Yes.
Frank Beal? President Brawley?
Yes.
Commissioner Cox?
Yes.
Mayor Darch?
Yes.
Jim Healy? Mayor Noak?
Yes.
President Reinbold?
Yes.
Mayor Rottering?
Yes.
Carolyn Schofield?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Sheehan?
Yes.
Matt Walsh?
Yes.
Diane Williams?
Not having been at the meeting, I abstain.
Okay,
The motion carries. This is the longest part of this meeting is the roll call, you know?
it is. Well, we're gonna have to get used to it. My apologies.
No problem. What else are you going to do? Aaron, your executive director's report?
Great. Thank you. And thanks. It's good to see everyone this morning. You know, I wanted to talk a little bit about the Regional Economic Recovery Task Force that we've been tasked with leading. So, you know, we assembled this task force at the request of the 7 county board chairs and also the city of Chicago. I'd like to start by just playing a brief video of Mayor Lightfoot, President Preckwinkle, and Chair Cronin voicing their support for the task force, and then I'll get into my report here.
Hello, everyone. I'm Mayor Lori Lightfoot, and I want to welcome you to today's virtual kickoff. When COVID-19 struck, our region launched a recovery task force in April, bringing together 200 members across government, nonprofit, corporate, faith, and community organization to support our communities and our local economies. However, because the challenges of COVID-19 don't stop at Chicago's borders, we also included a committee on regional coordination to ensure a holistic and inclusive recovery. We would then accelerate this work through June and later publish the nation's first ever citywide recovery plan in July. And now, We're proud to be moving into the implementation phase of this recovery work in Chicago and across the entire Northeastern region. This regional coordination has proven especially important because we learn from a regional perspective, recovery relies upon economic development, empowering our workforce and our tourism industry. Strengthening all of these sectors is clearly crucial to our overall recovery. But it will also require an all-hands-on-deck approach. That's why we're excited to continue this recovery work with dedicated individuals such as yourselves to not only reignite our diverse economy, but build a stronger, more resilient future for our residents. So thank you very much for your participation, and please remember to stay safe.
This has been an incredibly challenging year. COVID-19 has impacted all of us. We've had to work harder than ever before to keep our residents safe, healthy, and able to put food on the table. We've had the highest unemployment rates since the Great Depression in the 1930s. People aren't just worried about getting sick. People are worried about losing their homes, their jobs, and their savings. COVID exacerbated the existing inequities in our society. Now more than ever, we need to keep equity in the forefront as we plan for the region's recovery. We need to increase economic opportunity and quality of life for all residents. COVID presents a unique opportunity to build back better from this tragic year. Now is the time to advance equity through increased investments in transportation, housing, and small businesses. In fact, my fiscal year 2021 budget includes a $20 million equity investment to support the ongoing needs of residents and businesses impacted by COVID-19. Systems and structures that are failing communities of color are failing all of us. Advancing racial equity is to our collective benefit. I like to quote former Senator Paul Wellstone, who often said, "We all do better when we all do better." If we don't use an equity lens, this pandemic will only widen economic inequality. The Chicago region's diversity, strategic location, natural assets, and growing economy make us strong. We need to build on our strengths and think about what will benefit the whole region if we want to become stronger together.
Thank you, Mayor Lightfoot and President Preckwinkle. We in DuPage join in commitment to the region. I believe we can realize opportunities for economic growth together. During these unprecedented times, we've seen e-commerce grow rapidly as the world connects electronically. The role our region plays in the movement of goods will be paramount. Trucking and transportation networks, infrastructure in and around O'Hare Airport play a crucial role in enhancing economic opportunities. Now is the time to implement the strategy spelled out by the task force, work our plan, and achieve our goals.
Thank you. We wanted to share this with you because we thought it was, a great kickoff to the work that we led last week. This economic recovery task force includes members from each of the 7 counties and city of Chicago, and really recognizes that the region is stronger when it works together as one. And I'll just also note too that transportation is really the thread that runs through each of these 3 areas. So this task force is planned to scheduled to tackle economic development, where businesses choose to locate, workforce, how people get to the places they need to go, and tourism, and how people get to the assets across our region, which increasingly are important to stakeholders who live here in the region. By bringing together city and suburban leaders, experts, and advisors throughout the region, CMAP will help the region agree on some priorities, collaborate on solutions, and speak as one collective voice. The task force is co-chaired by myself and Paul Goodrich, who's representing the City of Chicago's COVID-19 Recovery Task Force, and Choose Chicago. The task force is really aimed at linking their work to what our private partners are doing in the same space to make it this public-private vision for the region. The 3 working groups, economic development, workforce development, and tourism, will meet monthly over the next year to identify some immediate and long-term actions for the region. So also in a similar vein, on today's agenda, we're asking for your approval for assistance on a regional mobility recovery plan. We've been in touch with the Regional Transportation Authority and our transit partners on what their needs and what their future may hold for transit. However, transit's only one component of our multimodal transportation system, and we really need to look at it holistically. So our goal with that project is to utilize your expertise and the partners around the table at the MPO Policy Committee to proactively address our post-COVID transportation needs. Got a few more notes here. I know that you all were aware that another big event took place a few weeks ago on November 3rd. As public servants, we look forward to working with all of our state and federal legislators and all 284 municipalities to implement policies that build resiliency and equitable transportation system and economic opportunity for all. We were heartened to see President-elect Biden's priorities aligned with CMAP's priorities in the On to 2050 plan, economic recovery, climate change and racial equity. So we will be reaching out to all of our new federal, county, and state representatives to make sure that they know of the resources and information that CMAP can provide them to be more successful in their roles. A note on transportation reauthorization. In October, the Senate and the President signed a continuing resolution to fund the government and also provided a one-year extension of the FAST Act through September 30th, 2021. So before COVID, we started to bring a working group of implementers and stakeholders and advocates together to talk about regional transportation needs so that we could speak in one voice to our congressional delegation and federal partners. When COVID hit, we pivoted to address federal relief needs directly related to those issues. So now with this one-year extension of the transportation bill and a new administration, we're going to refocus our efforts to be prepared to advocate for the transportation needs of our region, such as sustainable funding, addressing climate change, and aligning funding with performance goals. So in January, we'll bring you our full federal and state agendas for your consideration. We look forward to hitting the ground running with these initiatives with you, our local partners, and our federal partners. And then I just wanted to touch on a couple of things related to 2050. So service sharing, I know, is something that we've been talking a lot about with our stakeholders here as the pandemic continues to cut into revenue sources. More communities are looking at service sharing with their neighbors. It's a key recommendation in the 2050 plan. So to help municipalities explore these options, we held a CMAP Talks webinar a few weeks ago with municipal staff from Oswego, from Buffalo Grove, and from Berkeley to share best practices from these communities. We'll share a link to the recording in the chat box if you want to watch or share it with your partners that you work with. We'd appreciate that. And then we continue to use the media as well as speaking engagements to promote onto 2050 recommendations. So a couple other things that I'll mention of note that happened over the past month or so is that we co-authored an op-ed with Arnold Randall, the superintendent of the Cook County Forest Preserve, that was published in Crain's Chicago Business, promoting equitable access to parks. And we did this because through the 2050 planning process, we noted that only 25% of residents live near parks and open space, and that's across our region. And in more affluent areas, 50% have access to parks, but our goal for 2050 is to increase access to parks to 65% across our region. I was also interviewed in by Crain's for a story along with Chair Cronin and Representative Mayfield from Waukegan on consolidation of local government services. We'll share links to those in the chat box as well. And then just finally, late October, I spoke at the National Association for Metropolitan Planning Organizations to share some lessons learned from our STP shared fund process and how it really led to a more equitable distribution of federal transportation funding for projects of regional significance in this region. So many of our national colleagues are looking to us as they guide and as to how they can do some of this critical work as well and collaborate. So we were pleased to bring this resource and look forward to continuing to innovate how we do our work. So with that, that concludes my report. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions of Erin? Other than we're very excited, Erin, that CMAP is going to facilitate the Regional Economic Recovery Task Force. It's quite a challenge, and I think we're up to it. And most importantly, though, is the collaboration of local government officials to be part and have a voice in how we're going to go forward. So I know the mayors and county board chairs are very excited about the work laid out before us, and hopefully some good recommendations come down the road. Thank you.
Of course.
Under item 5, Angela, there are 5 items.
Good morning, CMAP board. I wanted to bring to you today 5 procurements that I'm seeking your approval on today. Can everyone hear me? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Okay. Great. Good morning again. So I'm seeking approval for the agency to enter into a contract with Miletus to develop a commercial service vehicle model and to design and conduct a commercial vehicle survey to collect that data that will be used to estimate vehicle trips that have a non-freight commercial purpose. Second approval I'm seeking is for the agency to enter into a contract with EBP to develop a long-range regional employment forecast that is required as part of the long-range planning process in our core NPO activities. Erin mentioned in her prior presentation about a contract we're bringing to the board for approval. It's a contract to enter into an agreement with AECOM to work with CMAP and regional partners in developing a visionary mobility strategy to support an equitable recovery from COVID-19 in the region. The fourth procurement we're seeking approval is to enter into a contract with APA to complete 14 to 15 of the municipal, pavement plans as part of the final phase of the pavement data collection and pilot pavement management program. And lastly, we're seeking approval of a resolution with Cook County for CMAP to access the Cook County Assessor's Office GIS data for research and analysis purposes. So those are the 5 procurements I'm seeking approval for today. I'm happy to answer any questions at this time.
Are there any questions of Angela or the items on the agenda? None being, can I have a board member? I'll entertain a motion to approve in a second.
Diane Williams, I move that we approve.
Rita Athos, second.
All right, there was a motion and a second. Again, any further comments? If not, Erin, read the roll call, please.
Great. Mayor Bennett,
Aye.
Rita Athos,
Yes.
Frank Beal,
Yes.
President Brawley,
Yes.
Commissioner Cox,
Yes.
Mayor Darch,
Yes.
Jim Healy, Mayor Noak,
Yes.
President Reinbold,
Yes.
Mayor Rottering,
Yes.
Carolyn Schofield,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Sheehan,
Yes.
Matt Walsh,
Yes.
Diane Williams,
Yes.
and the motion carries.
And the motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to item 6. Mayor Reinbold, do you have a committee report to give us?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We met this morning and staff gave the committee an update on the embedded staff planner program. As many of you know, this work is funded in part by the MacArthur Foundation, which I'm pleased to report on yesterday approved some of the staff recommended changes to that program. That was approved on yesterday. Staff also shared success stories from both Calumet Park and Sauk Village embedded planning program. A couple of the successes of note is both of these communities did receive Invest in Cook grant as a result of the embedded planner participation. Under the lessons learned, we were informed of 3 exciting new programs that CMAP will be kicking off on December 1st. They include embedding planners to implement LTA projects, a grant readiness program, and also a capacity building consortium around specific topics. We also discussed in regards to that the timeline, the community selection, and partner opportunities in addition to funding opportunities. Next, we heard an update on CMAP's work on the local incentive guide. This guide was published in September. The shared findings to date include differences between the academic versus the local perspective on using incentives to attract development, and also the impact incentives have on equity within the entire region. We did review the recommended action items under next steps. Those include updating data, working with the Village of Richton Park to implement some of the guide recommendation actions, and we'll also be engaging with other communities in the future. We also heard report outs from the various advisory committees chairs on topics they've been discussing in their meetings, including climate change, traffic safety, and COVID impacts. Our next scheduled meeting will be on January 13th. That concludes my report, Mr. Chairman. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Mayor. That was a very good update on what's going on. Other questions of Mayor Rambold on the committee? None being, I'm sorry.
I was just going to add that a thank you to staff for pivoting. You know, the program that we had with the MacArthur Foundation was really focused on doing a number of pilots in communities for extended periods of time. And with COVID, one of the things we wanted to do is be as responsive as possible. So we spoke to the MacArthur Foundation about developing some more tactical ways to help governments and really sort of aligning the COVID needs with what municipalities are experiencing and what future needs they might have over the next 18 months here. So just wanted to highlight the work of staff being nimble in order to address community needs.
Very good.
Thank you.
All right, under item number 7, Jason, on the climate focus area work plan.
Thank you, Chairman Bennett, and good morning, board members. And maybe it's too early to say it, but I'll say happy holidays anyway, as best you can. Let's enjoy the holidays coming up. So I appreciate the opportunity to present an overview of the climate work that we're doing this fiscal year, this current fiscal year. And a region prepared for climate change is one of the 3 goals that were included in the environment chapter of On to 2050. And Michelle, if you'll click to the next, we'll get the other text on there. Nope, not yet. Yep, right there. I'll also add that last year at around this time, through some strategic planning, agency leadership determined that climate would be one of the 3 implementation priorities going forward for the next 3 to 5 years. So this work plan this year sort of represents a kickoff to implementing that component of the plan. So within this goal, there were 2 broad strategies. You see them on your slide. To intensify climate mitigation efforts, that is reduce the amount of carbon being emitted into the atmosphere or reduce the amount of carbon in the atmosphere through other means. And the other is to prepare the region for a changing climate, to become more resilient and to prepare our most vulnerable communities for what's to come. And so, as I mentioned, this year's work plan marks the beginning of the implementation of On to 2050's climate goal. Next, please. As with most CMAP topics, we have data for multiple points in time that can show us a trend. In 2015, the transportation system represented 30% of the emissions, greenhouse gas emissions in the region. Now, that's a lot. It looks smaller than what you see in the dark green band, which is stationary energy. Actually, that band is typically broken up into things like energy generation, the use of energy in our buildings through burning of natural gas and other things, emissions from manufacturing. But on this graph, they are aggregated. In fact, transportation makes up the majority. If you break that green section up, transportation makes up the majority of the emissions in our region. And so 30% is a lot, but the real story on this slide is on the right side. And that is the trajectory from 2010, when we did our previous greenhouse gas inventory, to 2015. And as you can see, in stationary energy and waste, we had some improvements. We had some declines in the emissions. However, that is not the case on the transportation side. I will say that overall, there was a 7% decline from 2010 to 2015 in our emissions, from 128 million metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent, that's a mouthful, to 119. So a 7% decline, that's good news, but that's not what's happening in the transportation sector. Next slide, please. So if we look closer at the transportation sector, we can see in the left here that on-road emissions makes up the vast majority of the emissions in the region. And there's a distant second by off-road emissions. Off-road emissions includes things like construction, includes things like mining, which we don't have a ton of, but there is some, and other things like the running of lawnmowers and weed whackers and things that have basically no regulation. So on-road makes up the vast majority. On the right is, again, the trend lines, or at least 2 points in the trend that you can see here. So on the left band is the on-road emissions, and you can see that from in that 5-year period, that remained relatively flat, as did the next 3 components of that sector. But the off-road emissions ticked up slightly. We're not entirely sure why that's the case, but between 2010 and 2015, there was a lot of economic stimulus happening, a lot of construction was happening. We also know that there was an increased number of intermodal transfers within our region, which may be contributing to that as well. But as we can see, in the transportation sector, we are going a little bit in the wrong direction. And that's something, obviously, that's within our wheelhouse. Next slide, please. We also did some simple projections from 2015 out to 2050. And just very simply and very quickly, we have a business as usual trajectory of emissions. We have a current trend, which is the middle line, and we have a climate stabilization path, which is the green line. Business as usual reflects a situation in which the per capita emissions, the emissions per person, stays the same from now until 2050, but as our population increases, of course, the total emissions are going to increase apace. The current trend, the sort of slightly downward black line in the middle, is matching the decline that we saw between 2010 and 2015. So if that 7% overall decline continued year over year through 2050, that's where we would end up during that year. The green line, which is the ambitious line, but it's also the line that we really should be shooting for, is the climate stabilization path. And that dotted line at the bottom of the graph here represents the level of emissions at which scientific consensus suggests would help stabilize the climate at about a 1.5 degree centigrade temperature increase. And so that is the target that we have set, and that number represents an 80% reduction from the 2005 value by the year 2050. As you can see, we have some work cut out for us. Next slide, please, Michelle. This graph, we've all seen many variations of this graph. If we do nothing, the trend here of increasing temperature and increasing precipitation is simply going to continue. So I don't want to dwell on this. Some of our data, data geeks like me like to look at what the data actually looks like. Next slide, please. Other people are more captured, I guess, by photographs, maps, other things, other ways to visualize what's happening. And so, we could expect more of what's happening in the left image. In fact, what we've found that over the past century, the number of 2-inch rainstorms that we've received has approximately doubled. So we're getting double the number of 2-inch rainstorms per year than we were a century ago. The other important factor here is that our infrastructure, our stormwater infrastructure, which for many decades was designed to accommodate a 100-year storm, that is a storm that has a 1% chance of happening in any single year. Well, those storms are happening much more frequently. And so what's happening, and as precipitation continues to climb, is that over time, our infrastructure is becoming less and less adequate for adapting or to accommodating the amount of rainfall that we're getting. So something we ought to really be thinking about since we experience a lot of flooding in our region. And the map on the right simply shows that by the mid-century and end of century, Illinois may have a climate that's more akin to Louisiana, Texas. Me personally, I like New Orleans. I like Nashville. I like Austin, Texas. But nicer weather in Chicago is not really what we're talking about. There are many other impacts that we're going to be facing, including public health, and really impacts on our most vulnerable populations is where it's going to hurt the most. Next slide, please. Okay, now pivoting, it's not as if we've been ignoring this challenge up until ON to 2050 was adopted. In fact, we've done a number of things over the years. They include guidebooks, toolkits for local governments. They include strategy papers that were leading up to ON to 2050. We've done quite a bit of work around flooding and helping communities to prepare for flooding. And so on. But ON to 2050 really established the agency's position on climate. And as I mentioned in 2019, under Aaron's direction, the agency leadership identified climate as one of the 3 priorities that we're going to work on very hard for the next 3 to 5 years. The other 2 priorities are the transportation system and the regional economy. So obviously this is a priority for the agency and for the region as well. Next slide, please. So those examples were a little bit more distant history. More recently, we've been doing some stuff as well. In the spirit of working in partnership, we have been working with and supporting actually the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus lead on a project that has been supported by the Global Covenant of Mayors. And this is a regional guide for local climate action. It is a fairly comprehensive guide that local governments can take on and identify the kinds of things that they can be doing to help address this climate challenge. Just an aside here, the Global Council of Mayors is actually a European Union organization that provided technical assistance and other kinds of support to the Mayor's Caucus to get this project done. Frankly, it's a little bit embarrassing that the European Union is setting resources to the wealthiest country in the world to help us get on board with the climate challenge, but such as it is, we were thankful nonetheless. On the LTA side, we have a project that's just sort of ramping up, and that's with the Central Council of Mayors. We'll be working with them to examine their transportation system and areas where it may be vulnerable to flooding, and work on ways to make their transportation system more resilient. And then on the communications side, we have been conducting CMAP talks. These are facilitated conversations among our partners and experts. We did a series on regional stormwater resilience with our county stormwater agencies to talk about looking out into the future, what are you thinking about? And how are we going to accommodate this changing climatic pattern? And then finally, a number of updates were created and posted around how climate and the COVID challenge sort of play off one another. Next slide, please. So these activities are connected to our climate work plan for this year. And so I'm pivoting now to give you an overview of that work plan. And you can click once more, please, Michelle. These are the 5 projects that are in our climate focus area work plan for this year. This first one is called Climate Multi-Year Implementation Planning. Quite simply, this is a project in which we are going to take stock of where we are as a region, what our role is, where we're going as an agency, and how to get there. Typically, we do work planning for a single year, the coming year, but Aaron has given us the direction to look further out, which I think is brilliant and a great idea, to look further out to 3 to 5 years, because just looking to the next year isn't really going to help us address these wicked challenges, as we call them. I'm going to talk a little bit more about our progress on that project in just a moment. The second project is transportation mitigation strategies. And this is right in our wheelhouse, obviously. It's an area that we know we have a role in and that we are going to have to think very seriously about what our role is going to be and how we're going to try to move this forward. So in this project, we're exploring what mitigation strategies make sense to pursue here, starting with a list of over 100 and narrowing them down to something more reasonable that we can study and model in more detail to figure out what best works in our region. The third project is climate mitigation and adaptation technical assistance. This is the project whereby we're going to try to integrate strategies into our local work. So that's our local technical assistance program, our capacity building program, the programs whereby we are working directly with locals to help them with decision making and provide resources and so on. The fourth project is around data. This is where the greenhouse gas inventory work lives. We hope to do another one for the year 2020 in the next fiscal year's work plan. And we also hope to produce emissions profiles for every community in the region, which we think might be helpful as they plan to deal with this climate challenge. And finally, greenhouse gas reporting and monitoring. We have modeled and tracked air quality components for some time now through our conformity work, but we have not been doing that for greenhouse gases. There's been no standard, there's been no mandate to do so, so naturally we haven't done it, but I think we're having a change of heart now that this is something that we ought to be doing, and this project is an effort to explore how we are going to go about doing that. What kind of modeling are we going to do, so on and so forth. So next slide, please. So a little bit of progress that I'd like to report out on this first project that I mentioned, and this is the climate multi-year implementation planning work. And the goal here is to understand what's happening in the region, who's doing what our role could be, and where we're going to be going over the next 3 to 5 years. These are the steps in the process at a very high level. We've completed more or less stakeholder discussions and peer review, although that will be an ongoing thing. We'll always be checking in with those different parties. But for this project, we've completed those and we're now in the stage of identifying and prioritizing the project list. But let me tell you some of the results that we've heard from some of our engagement. Next slide, please. So in our peer-reviewed research, these are some of the things that we know our peers are doing. They're conducting vulnerability assessments at both the regional and local scale. Greenhouse gas emission inventories is something that many of them are doing. Very obviously, they're focusing on transportation mitigation strategies, working on building decarbonization, and of course, as we already know, partnering and providing resources is critical to implementing their climate goals. Next, please. We also talked to quite a few people in the region who work in this climate space to understand what's going on. And here are some of the things that we heard. We understand that energy and building sectors are moving. There's advancement there, but it was very obvious to us that transportation mitigation work is not really advancing in any major way. When we did ask about transportation mitigation, we heard a lot about electrification. Maybe that's just the flavor of the month or the year. But it tends to be getting the most attention these days. We also heard about mode shift, transportation demand management, and land use, but electrification is something that's on the lips of many, many who are working in this space. Other suggestions: reach out to the equity community to get a fuller perspective. Also, recognition that locals are very short on resources and knowledge and data and knowing how to move forward. So these are things that I think we knew, but it's good to confirm them. Next slide, please. We also asked about what CMAP's role could be. And some of this is going to be obvious to most of you, and many of the people we talk to know CMAP and know the kinds of things that we do. So these are probably not that surprising. We could have a regional coordination and convening role. Okay, we're already doing that, right? Obviously, transportation sector climate strategies is an area where we want to put quite a bit of focus. Data monitoring, analysis, and information dissemination, like the greenhouse gas inventory, for example. Providing direct local assistance, capacity building, and barrier removal strategies like model ordinances, guidebooks, tools, and direct assistance, helping communities actually surpass these barriers. And then a couple of other things, making sure our infrastructure and our communities are resilient to the coming climate changes. And finally, climate-friendly economic growth, which I won't get into in any detail here today. Next, please. We're at the stage now where we're identifying and prioritizing climate projects. This is running concurrent with our FY22 work plan and budget development process, which is underway now. And the goal is to identify pathways and projects to achieve long-term goals in this climate space. We'll use a few different filters to figure out what we ought to be doing, which are listed in these last 2 bullet points. What kinds of implementation avenues might we have? What kind of urgency is there? What kind of leverage and support are there for the different projects we would like to do, and so on. So we're going to be using a process of elimination to try to get to a manageable set of projects. And one more click, please. And so this is my final slide, just a recap of the projects that are in the work plan, and just some final takeaway messages here. One, some emissions sectors are heading in the right direction, transportation is not. Secondly, we know where we have to go in order to avoid the worst impacts of a changing climate, and we know the ways to get there. And third, CMAP has an important role to play in the region on this topic. We have a focus on the long term and the large scale. We provide regional guidance for transportation investments. We research and advise on policy at multiple scales. We provide data and tools to assist decision makers. And 5, we convene regional partners to catalyze action. And one final comment before I wrap up. We were on a call with NARC yesterday talking about a NOAA proposal that we're putting together that they are excited about. But they commented that they are going to be sending a memo to the new administration suggesting that regions are the right scale at which to be addressing this climate challenge. And I might say that I agree with that. And so hopefully we'll be doing that for the foreseeable future. So thanks very much. Maybe we have time for questions. I'll ask Aaron and the others if we do. And if not, I thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you, Jason. That was a lot to comprehend and a lot to think about going forward. Board members, you have questions of Jason?
This is Jim Healy. Can you hear me?
Yes, Jim.
Yeah, I was wondering, have we looked at what impact on current trends that climate change will have on the levels of Lake Michigan? I know they're already getting higher. Have we looked at what will end up, the possibility of what will end up happening on Lake Michigan?
Yeah, good question. We have not. Some others have, particularly at the state level, and some of the Great Lakes organizations have been looking at that. I can tell you that the projections are variable. Some of the projections say there will be more, some will say that there will be less. More precipitation versus more heat. Heat means evaporation out of the lake. So it's a little bit hard to say, but I can say I live by the lake and I can tell you that it's down from where it was at a peak in the middle of the summer. So I don't know if that's going to continue or not, but we haven't done that work, but I think it's something that we ought to certainly look at.
Jason, I just have a quick question. Certainly for the item on storm water management, and you are correct. Obviously, we all know and realize the numerous 2-inch rainfalls that we've had over the last 5 to 6 years. In the Chicago metro area, it's the MWRD, and certainly for the surrounding counties, it's also their county stormwater groups. Are you working with them? Implementing a change in any direction would be incredibly costly. All of our systems are designed for 100-year, and how are they going to go outside the box without redoing the entire system to come up with some type of plan that could augment or certainly attempt to rectify how we go forward with additional rainfall.
So we are. This year we initiated a quarterly convening of the regional stormwater agencies from the different counties. And we're starting to invite some of the other state players, the Illinois State Water Survey, which does modeling and other things. Incidentally, the State Water Survey also came out with the most recent precipitation tables that are used to as guideposts for designing infrastructure. And I think all of the counties have adopted those new precipitation tables that they will now require developers or those who are building stormwater infrastructure to adhere to. So we do have new data. How they incorporate that data and is one thing. As I say, they've already done that. And they're also starting to update their standards and update their regulations and so on and so forth. What we're trying to do is to talk to them about, okay, but every time we update those data tables, which are actually backwards looking, right? They look at trends over the last 5 decades in order to make precipitation tables for today. Well, next year, the precipitation amounts are already continuing to go up. So we're already behind, right? So we're trying to work with them to help understand how can we look forward and use not only historic data, but look forward and look at projections and use that as a design feature for designing our systems. Now, there's a few different ways to approach this. One is just to require more freeboard or more distance above the flood level and the bottom of your building, for example. But that's just one solution. And I know we have Mr. Mayor Brawley on the phone. I might just ask if he wanted to comment. He's an engineer and maybe work together. So Matt, if you care to comment on this, I'd love to hear what your thoughts are.
Yeah, stormwater management.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So actually left my engineering firm, now work on the developer side for the past year and a half. So I've gotten to see kind of what folks like in Lake County with their SMC have implemented over the last year or so with the increased rainfall data. So it's been interesting. It's been tough from a development side. I mean, to make sure that that land is still developable up there and you're storing the required volume that you need. So it's certainly a change in that regard, but important. And you're absolutely right that it is backwards looking, that we are looking at historical storms like in DuPage County. They look at 100 and some historical events. I mean, it doesn't really forecast what's happening in the future, which it mainly means that our ponds, our stormwater management facilities are not going to be designed for the 100-year in the future. They're going to be designed for, something less than that. So definitely a concern, I think, for all of us going forward.
Yeah. So the mayor's question was, what are we going to do? Not sure, Mayor Bennett, what we're going to do, but we are encouraging them to look forward, not just backwards at what might be happening in the future.
Thanks, Jason. Any other questions? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, this is Ann. Hi. I just want to make a comment on Lake Michigan. The city is obviously really actively following the lake levels. We had obviously last year we had tons of problems with flooding on Lakeshore Drive and a lot of erosion to the lakefront, which we're actively working to address. We are focusing this year on we're hoping to get funding to do some revetment projects along Morgan Shoal, which is at like 4500 South Lakeshore Drive. Also want to do some planning around Promontory Point. And then we are lobbying the federal government to get additional funds to start an evaluation of sort of where we should be focusing on the next 8 miles of revetment projects. So we certainly, in consultation with the Army Corps, they feel like we are in for some high lake levels, likely into the winter and spring months, and the river is high as well, which creates lots of complications for us, but we're actively monitoring that and working with all the businesses downtown that are along the river, as well as homeowners along the lake to try to mitigate anything that we can. So certainly top of mind here at the city.
Thanks, Ann. Again, any further questions? Again, Jason, thank you. We'll move on to the legislative update. Laura on the federal side and Gordon on the state side. Whoever wants to go first.
So Mayor Bennett, I'll just note here that I know that many of us are aware that the federal government is in transition and that veto was canceled at the state level. Veto sessions were canceled. So I'll just, Laura and Gordon are on the line if you all have questions, but in terms of a substantive update, there isn't too much to report.
Are you asking them or?
Yeah. No, if you have, if anybody on the board has questions.
I think the only question for all of us, certainly at the local level, is going forward in the spring session, because it appears the General Assembly will not be meeting until you know, their normal spring session, if that's even possible. The concern going forward for all of us is because of the failure of the passing of the fair tax, how the state's going to operate its budget going forward. And we are very concerned at the local level about things like LDGF. And I know the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus, the Illinois Municipal League are obviously going to be watching very closely, and whether or not the task force and or even our agency, Aaron, as usual with the General Assembly, they do things and don't look at the analysis and the impact, how it's going to affect. So I guess keep that in mind for our agency. If they don't want to do analysis, that we need to either work with some legislative groups out there, the caucus or the IML, and forecasting the impacts if they get into a position of starting to take away local share money.
Yeah, I think, you know, as we have the expertise in terms of tax policy and analysis and the impacts to the local level, we're happy to provide data and that level of expertise.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. Any other comments on legislative? Any other business? Any other public comment?
I don't believe we got any notifications about public comment in advance.
Okay. All right, now we're moving into an area we haven't done before, and that's to go to a executive session Zoom. First, I need a motion to allow us to do that. Is there a motion?
Motion Healy.
Second, Reinbold.
Aaron, call the roll.
Great. Mayor Bennett,
Aye.
Rita Athos,
Yes.
Frank Steele, President Brawley,
Yes.
Commissioner Cox,
Yes.
Mayor Darch,
Yes.
Jim Healy,
Yes.
Mayor Noak, President Reinbold,
Yes.
Mayor Rottering,
Yes.
Carolyn Schofield,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Sheehan,
Yes.
Matt Walsh,
Yes.
Diane Williams.
Yes.
And I'll just, motion carries. I'll just note that this is pursuant to 5 ILCS 120/2 C1 to discuss executive director's performance review and review prior closed session minutes. So the meeting will remain.
You can join.
All right, just want to quickly mention that the board will be coming back after the executive session to end the meeting.
right, I do believe, let's see, Mayor Bennett, are you back?
I am here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you just fine. Angela, do you want to?
Absolutely, I'll go ahead.
Great.
In closed session, the board approved draft minutes from November 13, 2019. They approved authorization to release minutes from November 13, 2019. It was also approved continued confidentiality of all other meetings that was listed and destruction of the recordings after 18 months.
Those items were discussed by the board in executive session. They are recommended. They weren't approved. The purpose of this right now is for the board, based upon Angela's report of the meeting, that I'll entertain a motion that we approve those items submitted by Angela. Is there a motion?
So moved, George.
Second, Rotary.
Moved and seconded. Aaron, you want to read the roll call?
Yep, Mayor Bennett,
Aye.
Rita Athos,
Yes.
Frank Beal,
Aye.
President Brawley,
Yes.
Commissioner Cox, Mayor Darch,
Yes.
Jim Healy,
Lost him. Huh?
Mayor Noak, oh, look, looks like Jim arrived. Jim Healy, we're doing a roll call vote on releasing the minutes.
Aye. I didn't hear anything.
No worries, Angela reported that we were releasing the minutes from November 13th.
Aye.
Thank you. Mayor Noak, President Reinbold,
Yes.
Mayor Rattering,
Aye.
Carolyn Schofield,
Yes. Sorry.
no, that's okay. Deputy Mayor Sheehan,
Yes.
Matt Walsh,
Yes.
Diane Williams.
Yes.
And the motion carries. The board, for the record, also discussed the executive director's annual review. And with that in mind, I let the board know that we are not meeting in December as traditional. Thank good for that. We will meet again in January. Aaron, anything else I missed before I adjourn this?
No, I just, this will be a strange holiday season, but I wish you all the best. Great. Executive committee is coming up next, but I wish you all the best over the holidays. And I know small is sometimes not ideal, but I'm taking great pleasure in spending a little bit more time with my kids and my husband. So I hope you all have a great holiday season.
Thanks again to all the board members also. Can I do this by voice vote, or do we still have to vote by singular vote?
I think to close the meeting, we're okay to do voice vote.
All right. Any other comments or questions of that? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move. Second.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by the vote of aye.
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 Opposed, vote of no. That's the way I like to do this. The motion carries. Meeting adjourned. Enjoy the holidays all. Stay safe, please. Thank you.
Thank you.
Happy
Thanks, everyone.
holidays.
Holidays to everyone.
Bye-bye.